When the law fails, sometimes justice bleeds from the hands of a mother. In a quiet West Texas town, Sheriff Dana Whitaker walked into her home expecting routine, and found her worst nightmare wrapped in her husband's hands. What followed was not law enforcement. It was vengeance. Dana Whitaker, 39, respected county sheriff. Reverend Marcus Whitaker, 44, beloved pastor, her husband. Lena, 10, their daughter, innocent, joyful, and deeply loved. The shocking headline: Texas sheriff removes husband's testicles after catching him with their daughter. If this story already has your heart racing, hit that like button, subscribe to True Crime Stories Arena, and drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if justice wore your name, but your child's safety was on the line? In the small, sun-drenched town of Bracewell, Texas, where the streets were slow and the porch lights came on before dusk, Sheriff Dana Riggsby wore her badge like a family heirloom. Her father, a decorated Marine turned local police chief, had always told her, protect the weak, punish the wicked. Never flinch. From a young age, Dana didn't just memorize the code, she lived by it. While other girls played house or planned prom nights, Dana was cleaning her father's service pistol under supervision, studying criminal law textbooks he left lying around the living room like storybooks. By the time she turned 19, she joined the police academy. 17 years later, she was elected the first female sheriff in Bracewell's history. Not because she asked for it, but because the town trusted her. Trusted her integrity. Trusted her instincts. Trusted her name. Dana balanced her life like a sacred trinity: faith, law, and motherhood. A cross hung on her rearview mirror, a Glock rested on her hip, and a crayon drawing from her daughter, Lena, was tucked neatly into her patrol notebook. But one quiet Thursday evening, one of those days that begins with coffee and ends in blood, the pillars that upheld Dana's world began to crack. She would come to learn that evil doesn't always wear a mask, and sometimes, it sleeps in the room next to your child's. Marcus Riggsby was the kind of man people didn't question, only admired. With a voice like smooth gospel and a smile that softened sorrow, he wasn't just Dana's husband, he was Bracewell's spiritual cornerstone. He had charisma in the pulpit and warmth in his touch. He christened newborns with holy water and whispered blessings over hospital beds. He held couples together when love frayed, and buried the dead with words that made grief seem gentle. To the townsfolk, Marcus was a shepherd with clean hands and a golden tongue. But to Dana, something never sat right. It began with the small things. A stare held a beat too long when young women passed by. A sermon that suddenly seemed too vague. A laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. Then came the late-night texts. The phone always locked. The excuses that never followed logic. Dana, trained to chase down lies, began burying her own. She told herself it was stress. Ministry was heavy work. Maybe he just needed space. Maybe she was imagining things. But the unease wouldn't leave her chest. And then came the day. The house was too quiet. Midday sun filtered through the windows, but something in the air was wrong. Dana stepped inside and called out for Marcus and Lena. No answer. Footsteps slow, breath tight, she moved down the hallway. Lena's bedroom door, slightly ajar. A muffled sound inside, like someone trying not to be heard. What she saw changed everything. In that moment, the sermons, the prayers, the perfect smiles, none of it mattered. Because behind closed doors, the man she loved, the man the town revered, had removed his mask. And what lay beneath was nothing holy. The afternoon sun hadn't even begun to dip when Dana pulled into the driveway. Earlier than usual, fresh off the adrenaline of solving a high-profile kidnapping case that had rattled neighboring counties. The kind of win that usually called for celebration. A warm meal. A kiss from Marcus. A tight hug from their daughter, Lena. She expected the door to swing open before she even reached it. That's how Lena usually greeted her, barefoot, smiling, arms wide. But today, the house stood still. No creak of footsteps. No cartoons humming from the living room. Just silence. Dana's instincts, sharpened by years of law enforcement, prickled instantly. Something was off. Not loud. Not violent, but wrong. The air inside felt like a room where something had just happened, but the evidence hadn't yet settled. Lena, she called softly. Marcus? Nothing. She moved through the living room like she was approaching a crime scene. Each step slower than the last. That heavy stillness hung everywhere, on the walls, in the air, even on the floorboards beneath her. Then came the sound. Soft, guttural, muffled crying. From behind Lena's bedroom door, her pulse quickened. She placed her hand on the knob, turned it slowly, and walked into the one moment no parent should ever witness. There, in the dim light bleeding through pink curtains, stood Marcus. And Lena. What he was doing, couldn't be undone. Dana didn't scream. She didn't speak. She didn't even move, not at first. The world went silent. Time split open. She froze. And in that split second of unbearable stillness, the universe held its breath. Then came the sound of her own heart breaking, like glass shattering against stone. The mask had fully fallen now. And what stared back at her wasn't a husband. It was a monster. Dana didn't scream. Didn't reach for her radio. Didn't call for backup. She simply moved. Not like a mother. Not like a sheriff. But like something primal, an instinct sharpened by betrayal, agony, and years of pent-up suspicion. Her badge didn't guide her now, rage did. In one motion, she lunged. The pistol stayed holstered. No need for bullets. Her fists were faster. A single strike to Marcus's jaw sent him crashing to the floor, stunned, breathless. His sermon-slick mouth filled with blood. He didn't fight. Maybe he couldn't. Or maybe he thought she wouldn't. But Dana had already stopped being the woman he thought he knew. She dragged him like dead weight across the floor, her grip precise, her mind cold. She opened the drawer where she kept her trauma shears, the same ones she'd used to save lives on wrecked highways and bloody accident scenes. Today, she didn't use them to save anyone. With surgical fury, she knelt down, and without hesitation, without mercy, she made her cut. The sound wasn't loud. But his scream was. Marcus writhed. Blood soaked the carpet. His moans turned to sobs, then silence. Dana stared down at him, hands steady, eyes emotionless. You're never going to hurt her, or anyone, ever again. And in that room, where so much innocence had been stolen, justice wasn't blind. It was a mother. The cruiser pulled into the driveway just as the last of Marcus's screams had faded into whimpers. Deputies Alvarez and Boone weren't expected, they were dropping by on a routine welfare check from an earlier call. They stepped into the home like any other visit. But what they walked into, froze them cold. The living room was still. The hallway thick with the metallic scent of blood. And in Lena's doorway, they saw it, Marcus Riggsby, the town's beloved pastor, lying in a pool of red. Pale. Barely conscious. Eyes wide with shock. Sheriff Dana Riggsby stood over him, hands stained, jaw clenched, but calm. Too calm. Her voice didn't waver. Take him to the ER. The deputies didn't move. He'll live, she said, her eyes locked onto theirs. But justice starts now. They obeyed. No one questioned her, not out loud. But as they loaded Marcus into the back of the cruiser, a silent ripple ran through them. A shiver of confusion. Of dread. Something sacred had just shattered. And the sheriff they thought they knew, might never be the same again. The next morning, as sunlight spilled across the asphalt and the American flag flapped gently over the Bracewell County Sheriff's Office, Dana Riggsby walked through the precinct doors with a silence that carried weight. No sunglasses. No sidearm. No words. She passed her fellow officers, men and women she'd trained, mentored, bled beside. None of them spoke. Some stepped aside. Some stared. A few couldn't look at her at all. Straight down the hall she walked, boots echoing like war drums, until she reached the captain's office. The door was open. She didn't knock. She stepped in, reached into her coat pocket, and with the precision of someone finishing a chapter, placed her badge, worn and scuffed, on his desk. Then 5 words fell like thunder. I'm turning myself in. The room went still. The bullpen beyond the glass quieted to a breathless hush. Captain Langley stood frozen. He'd known Dana since she was a rookie. Had seen her chase murderers through ravines, negotiate hostage standoffs, cradle overdose victims until paramedics arrived. But he'd never seen her like this. I don't deny what I did, she said, voice steady. I had to protect her. She turned to leave, then paused. I'd do it again. And with that, the sheriff walked out, no longer an officer, but a mother who had made her choice. The headlines came swift and sharp. Sheriff mutilates pastor husband in vigilante act. Justice or revenge? Texas mother's brutal retaliation sparks outrage. Brieswell, once a town built on Sunday sermons and shared casseroles, split down the middle overnight. Half saw Dana Riggsby as a mother forged in righteousness, driven not by rage, but by duty. They called her a hero. A protector. A woman who did what the system too often failed to do. The other half couldn't look past the blood. The mutilation. The badge she'd once worn now tainted, in their eyes, by vengeance. They whispered behind curtains, clutched their children closer, and questioned everything they thought they knew about justice. Church pews sat emptier. Prayer circles turned into debates. Neighbors stopped waving. The town felt quieter, like even the wind held its breath. And at the heart of it all stood Dana. No longer sheriff. No longer wife. Just a woman who had made the unthinkable choice, and now watched her hometown unravel because of it. Trust, once Brieswell's greatest currency, had become its deepest wound. From his hospital bed, bandaged, bruised, but alive, Marcus Riggsby found a new pulpit, the media. With cameras pointed at his pale face and microphones lined at his bedside, he spoke not with humility, but with vengeance. She's unstable, he told the press. Jealous. Controlling. Violent. Everything she's saying about me, she made it up to destroy my name. The words echoed across the state. Syndicated segments ran nightly. Talk shows debated whether Dana Riggsby was a betrayed mother, or a woman unhinged. Marcus painted himself as the true victim. Said Dana's accusations were delusions, weaponized to cover up her own mental collapse. Then came the legal team, high-powered attorneys in polished suits, funded by donations from loyal parishioners who refused to believe their beloved pastor could ever stray from grace. He filed formal charges against Dana: assault, attempted murder, malicious mutilation. He wanted her punished. Stripped of honor. Forgotten. But it wasn't just her freedom he wanted gone. It was her legacy. And for the first time in his life, Marcus Riggsby wasn't preaching redemption. He was demanding ruin. Brieswell became a pressure cooker overnight. News vans lined the courthouse lawn like vultures in formation. National anchors reported live from Main Street, painting the quiet Texas town as the center of a moral reckoning. Protesters clashed outside the courthouse steps, some waving signs that read, "Justice for Lena," others chanting, "No one's above the law." Inside, the air was colder. Still. As if the building itself held its breath. The trial of Dana Riggsby began under fluorescent lights and unblinking cameras. Every word weighed. Every pause dissected. The prosecution moved fast. They called it vigilante justice. Claimed Dana's act was not protective, but personal. Fueled by humiliation, not heroism. They played recordings, presented forensic photos, quoted statutes. This was deliberate mutilation, they argued. An unlawful retaliation, outside the reach of the law she once swore to uphold. But Dana's defense painted a different picture. They spoke of a mother's instinct. A moment of crisis. A lifetime of discipline breaking under the weight of betrayal. They called it temporary insanity born from unbearable trauma. They brought in character witnesses, fellow officers, victims she'd saved, townspeople who once called her the backbone of Brieswell. Then Dana took the stand. Her voice didn't shake. "I didn't plan to hurt him," she said. "I just wanted it to stop. I needed it to end, permanently. No theatrics. No tears. Just the truth, laid bare." The courtroom sat silent. Even the judge didn't speak for a full breath. Because in that moment, everyone in the room knew. This trial wasn't just about the law. It was about who has the right to say when justice begins, and when it ends. The courtroom shifted when Lena took the stand. Barely 12, small for her age, with a trembling voice but eyes that held something ancient, something no child should ever carry. She clutched a stuffed rabbit in her lap, the same one she'd slept with since she was 4. The courtroom hushed, not out of formality, but reverence. Every camera clicked, then stopped. Every breath was held. The bailiff swore her in, but it was the silence that gave weight to her words. Lena looked straight ahead. Not at her father. Not at her mother. Just, forward. "He told me not to tell anyone," she whispered. "That if I said anything, Mommy would go away forever. A gasp broke the silence, followed by another. The prosecutor stood still. No need to push further. Lena kept speaking. It started before Christmas, years ago. He said it was love. That it was special. But it didn't feel right. It hurt. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. She spoke of nights when Dana worked late. Of how Marcus read her Bible verses before locking the door. Of how he made her promise to never speak a word. But now, she had spoken. And Marcus Riggsby, once a man of God, sat red-faced, unmoving. The mask he wore for decades had finally crumbled, shattered by the very voice he tried to silence. There was no sermon that could save him now. Only silence. And shame. The gavel struck like thunder, once, sharp and final. Marcus Riggsby, sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. No appeals. No leniency. No redemption arc for the man who once baptized children and broke bread with the grieving. The courtroom didn't cheer. It didn't have to. The silence said everything. He left in shackles, eyes downcast, past rows of townspeople who no longer recognized the man they once called pastor. Then came the judgment for Dana. She stood, hands steady at her sides, her fate resting in a system she once served. The jury had heard the whole story. The trauma. The betrayal. The moment of violent clarity in that quiet bedroom. And while the law could not fully condone what she had done, it could understand why. Verdict, cleared of all criminal charges. But not without consequence. The judge ordered her into mandatory trauma therapy and placed her under monitored house recovery for 1 year. She wasn't free. But she wasn't in chains either. Outside, Breeswell began to rebuild, slowly, cautiously. Some people nodded again at the grocery store. A few returned to church. Kids played in parks, though parents watched closer now. But something fundamental had shifted. The town had seen beneath the surface. And now, it would never forget. The sun dipped low over Breeswell, casting long shadows across Dana Riggsby's backyard, once filled with laughter, birthday balloons, and cookouts with neighbors who used to call her Sheriff. Now, it was silent. Still. She walked the narrow path between the old swing set and the weathered fence, her hands tucked into the pockets of a faded hoodie. No badge on her chest. No radio clipped to her hip. The uniform that once defined her was boxed up and buried in the hall closet, behind Lena's old school drawings and family photo albums that would never feel the same. But Lena was safe. She had started sleeping through the night again. Drawing again. Smiling, sometimes. And Dana would take that as a victory. Because peace doesn't always come with parades. Sometimes, it comes in fragments, stolen moments where the air feels breathable again, and a child can look her mother in the eye without fear. Dana paused at the edge of the porch, the sky burning orange and gold behind her. No medals. No applause. Just the quiet ache of having done what had to be done. The narrator's voice, calm but unwavering, offers the last word. Justice isn't always wrapped in courtrooms and codes. Sometimes, it's written in blood, by a mother who refused to let evil wear the mask of grace. And with that, the sun slipped beneath the horizon. Was Dana Whitaker a hero? Or a sheriff who crossed a line she could never uncross? Would you have waited for the law to act, while your child lived in fear? Or would you, like Dana, take justice into your own hands? Let us know what you would have done in the comments. If this story gripped your heart and raised your pulse, subscribe to True Crime Stories Arena and turn on your notifications. We uncover the most haunting real-life and fictional tales, stories where law, love, and betrayal clash in ways no one sees coming. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and stay alert.